Hey, what's up? Welcome back to another edition of the Mandatory Live. This time, we're going to be breaking down what we saw this weekend between Anthony Joshua and Daniel Dubois. We're going to get into all of that. Before we do, though, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Also, follow us on our social media channels. We're at the Mandatory TKO. And if you got a couple of minutes, of course, you can always leave a rate and review. Also, give us a 5-star because that helps the channel grow. Jaime Munguia got the stoppage in the 10th round against Erik Bazinyan. And this was a fight, Bryan, where Jaime Munguia was losing in the beginning and he turned it up in the second half of the fight. But Erik Bazinyan boxed really well. And at one point, I was thinking, man, Jaime Munguia has to turn it up and knock him out because Erik Bazinyan's put on a good performance. But this was a back and forth fight. But I thought it was extremely impressive for Jaime Munguia because it was a tough fight.
Got to clap it up for Erik Bazinyan because as I'm looking at his box track now, like this is something that I had to talk about before the fight. I was like, I really don't know how to assess this because Erik Bazinyan probably should have lost his last fight, which they called a draw, hometown decision. And he hadn't really fought anybody of note where it's like, oh, he beat this person, he beat that person. He just kind of had a padded record. Now, the dirty little secret in boxing is that everyone has a padded record. Every single guy, right? Like damn near everybody.
That's how you start your career. You pad your record.
Right,
That's
right,
legit boxing, right? So
right. Like I don't come to Jake Paul's defense very often, but what I will say is like people give him shit for padding his record, and it's like, hey, I mean, all of his contemporaries kind of do it. I would say like even he should at least fight better opposition, but still,
maybe
like,
not. Maybe when it's like not former MMA guys. If he was just
right,
padding his record with regular dudes that were like boxing, I'd be like, I cut him some slack. But same type
right,
of scenario, I guess you could
right. I
say.
agree because I'm not I'm not trying to cape up for dude, but listen, this is what it is. So with Eric Bazinian, um clap it up for you just earned yourself another big payday because you're gonna get another money fight after this. It might be on Top Rank again. Like, if I'm Top Rank, I might be like, all right, Christian and Bailey, your turn. Let's set up you versus Jaime Munguia. Let's see how you do against Eric Bazinian. And then send Bazinian back to Montreal where he could, rack up some wins again. But no, I think Jaime Munguia showed a lot in this performance in terms of just sticking with it. Right, we saw a level of just tenacity and that will to come back that we don't always see from him because he's not often trailing in fights because he's often in one-sided fights before this. Speaking of padded records, and he was able to showcase himself in a way that is like, all right, now we want to see him against some of the other top super middleweights. I just mentioned Christian and Billy. That's the obvious one because that's the top rank one. Top rank can make that, announce it as a main event in, I don't know, February or March, and people will be like, yeah, that makes sense. And the winner will probably be a number one contender to, some form of super middleweight championship, assuming Canelo doesn't have all the belts still. Because, Jaime Munguia already went down that rabbit hole, and maybe Christian and Billy is destined to as well. Also, interestingly enough, mentioned at the end of the night, he wants to fight via Jaime Munguia, Edgar Berlanga, or Caleb Plant. There were a couple guys mentioned, but when pressed on who he wants next, that's who he mentioned by name, Caleb Plant and Edgar Berlanga. And the Edgar one is interesting because Edgar just lost. But this is what you've been saying, Shantelle, about him, and I've been agreeing with. That dude is a star. People react to him, and Jaime Munguia knows, one, he could probably beat Edgar Berlanga. I'm not sure how I'd go in that fight. I can go either way with it. I got to think about it a little bit more. But one, he could beat Edgar Berlanga. But two, that fight will make a shit ton of money. Like,
I to be honest, I don't know who I would take in that fight because I was pretty impressed with Edgar Berlanga in the Canelo fight, and I want to see him have a tune-up fight. But you could do that Cinco de Mayo weekend. I know that's Canelo weekend, or even Mexican Independence Day next year. I know that's Canelo weekend as well, but it could be the co-main, Jaime
it,
Munguia and Edgar Berlanga. That's a massive fight, but it could also headline itself.
or
Or they have it in New York too, by the way.
Puerto Rican Day Parade weekend. I was
Yes,
gonna say.
yes, for sure. Because
Here's the thing. So who has to get? How do you not get a home field advantage there, right? Because if you're putting the fight in Vegas, where a lot of fights are in Vegas, we know that's going to skew toward Jaime Munguia. If you put it on the East Coast, if you put it in New York or
Berlanga.
Florida, that's going to be Berlanga heavy, right? If you put it in Texas, that's going to be Munguia, California, Munguia. Like, and then you have, all right, Top Rank is on the Munguia side, but Edgar Berlanga still has matchroom boxing.
Yeah.
So like how do you sort of? I wonder like what? How do you do this? Is it
You
just
know,
going to be Vegas?
I don't know because I like the Puerto Rican Day Parade thing because I think that fight is big enough to headline itself and that it should get its own shine because if you're the co-main on a Canelo card, it's going to be pretty much overshadowed by Canelo fighting.
Who's the bigger draw between Berlanga and Jaime Munguia?
I think they're both big draws because Jaime Munguia, like the Mexican fans show out for him, right? Like you could just hear it in the crowd when they're chanting his name. I think they both have this superstar power. And to be honest with you, Munguia's performance on Friday was so impressive that I think he gained even more stardom from that coming off of
Yeah.
Canelo. Like the way that he fought was different. He has taken another leap and we saw that on Friday against Erik Bazinyan, who I know isn't a big name, but nonetheless, that was a tough fight. And you're going to see Erik Bazinyan fight other guys. Like you're probably going to see him possibly fight a Edgar Berlanga, maybe fight a Diego Pacheco. He's the way that he fought Jaime Munguia, we're going to be seeing him fight some other dudes as well. To be honest, I don't even know who I would be picking in that fight with Jaime Munguia and Edgar Berlanga. Maybe I'd lean towards Munguia because of the work rate. They
I,
both have power, but I would like I think that's a pretty even fight though, to be honest with you.
work rate, and experience will point to
Yeah.
Munguia. I don't know who has more power either.
They
I
both
don't
have good
I don't
power.
know. Like
They
I
both
don't
have
know.
really good
That's
power.
a tough one. One of the
That's the fight to make though. Like
I'm
for me, that's the fight to make.
I'm just thinking of places you put this. Like I feel like the most fair place, and I don't know when's the last time we had a big time fight in this city, but Chicago. Chicago
I was gonna
has a
say it's
lot of
been a
Puerto
minute.
Ricans. Chicago has a lot of Mexicans. I feel like you can get more of a split atmosphere there.
But
Because a
when
lot
was
of
the last time there was a fight in Chicago? Like I don't even remember. That must
I'm
have been
gonna
a
look.
minute ago.
I'm
That
gonna
must have been
look.
a it must have been a while ago. Like I can't remember the last time a fight was in Chicago. That had to be
Uh,
more than 7 years ago.
Yeah, but that's the place where I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, maybe it's in Chicago, but like I don't like they don't typically like that's not one of the venues that's in the top rank rotation. I want to say Matchroom did something not too long ago from there, but we're about to find out. So we have Wintrust Arena, Chicago, Illinois, October 12th, 2019.
Yeah.
So this is free
I was pretty
COVID.
close. Yeah.
Dimitri Bivol. This is actually Eddie Hearn promoting this, so that's interesting. Maybe they can call them up and set that up again. But Dimitri Bivol fought Gilbert Castillo Rivera, and Alexander Usyk beat Chaz Witherspoon. So that was his heavyweight debut. Jessica McCaskill was also on his card. Oh shit, Charles Conway fought Patrick Day on this card, and I think
That's a
Patrick
name I
Day.
haven't heard in a minute.
I think Patrick Day died because of the
Yeah.
injuries suffered in this fight. Moving right along, that wasn't awkward. Anthony Sims Jr. was also on this card as well. So like there were some names on here, and that was the last time. But I do remember like Wintrust Arena being in the rotation for a while. But after that, you go to 2017, and then there were a lot of fights in Chicago, like on TV in 14, 15, 16, 17, like the mid 2010s, mid to late 2010s. But yeah, there hasn't been one for a minute. So I think that's where I would look, honestly.
But I think that would be fair, but I think it either happens in Vegas or New York. I
Yeah.
guarantee you. Those are
Yeah.
the only two spots where I
Or
think it
Cali.
happens.
I think Cali too.
Yeah, but then you gotta also think maybe it could happen in Arizona, which I think would be a very heavy Jaime Munguia crowd, which is where they had that top rank card. But I think I love the Glendale fights. I
If
love
I'm
it.
if I'm Edgar Berlanga, I don't do it next because I try get a win first.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think I think Top Rank would want that anyway to like build the fight up more.
There's some good names that Edgar Berlanga could also face.
Eric
Fight Air,
Bazinian.
that's the one I was thinking, right? Would it be a tough fight?
Eric Bazinian, but also fight Trevor McCumbee, someone who just
Yeah.
beat fight one of these dudes that just lost to somebody you're chasing and
I
try to
can
beat them in better fashion.
So here's the thing. Caleb Plant is such an interesting name in this division because I think both guys want to fight him. I think the storylines for Edgar Berlanga and Caleb Plant are even far more interesting because they go back and forth quite often. But I think Edgar Berlanga, there's a path for him as well where he could have a tune-up fight, Trevor McCumbee, Erik Bazinian, and then possibly fight a Caleb Plant and then a Jaime Munguia. Like Edgar Berlanga has a chance to make money fights, and it's exciting for him. But I think we all kind of want to see Jaime Munguia and Edgar Berlanga. And the one guy waiting in the shadows for me is Diego Pacheco.
Diego Pacheco.
And
Yep.
I would take him to beat both Jaime Munguia and Edgar Berlanga. He needs to build up his resume a little bit more though and stay active. But this division is very interesting.
Yeah. Don't want to overlook Christian and Billy either. Christian and
Yes,
Billy deserves a big fight. Um, and shit, Christian and Billy beat Sergey Derevianchenko a lot more convincingly than Jaime Munguia did. Like a lot
sure.
more convincingly. So I mean, if you told me he's actually the next best super middleweight in the world after Canelo Alvarez, like I'd listen.
Yeah,
I don't know if I agree. I might. I'd listen though, because I would say that the flaws with Jaime Munguia and Edgar Berlanga are more obvious than the ones from Christian and Billy, but we haven't seen Mbili be pushed. Not to be fair to Jaime Munguia, and granted, it wasn't that far removed, but he fought a better version of Sergey Derevianchenko, who's older and has had wars and has had a lot of close fights. Like, let's see Christian and Billy in another fight. But yeah, all these guys should fight each other. That just comes back to that. And I think, but if I'm like the czar of super middleweight for a second, like the fight that I would want to be making the most and setting up the most, Edgar Berlanga versus Jaime Munguia, because you could actually sell Puerto Rico versus Mexico in a balanced way, like in a real way, not like Canelo versus Berlanga, where it's like we know Canelo's going to win this fight. Stop it.
that's a. You could argue it's a 50-50 fight.
You can.
You can. That's how good of a fight that would be. And what we want to know is drop your comments. We want to know who you want to see Edgar Berlanga fight next, who you want to see Jaime Munguia fight next. Is that the fight to make? Munguia and Berlanga? Let us know. Drop some comments below. Also, make sure if you like the content, hit that like and subscribe button and follow us on our social media channels. We're at the Mandatory TKO. Bryan, we always went for a full hour. We said we weren't going to do that before we hopped on. But once we get talking boxing, we keep on going. Is there any final
Yeah.
thoughts before we get up and out of here?
Yeah. We'll see what happens in the heavyweight division, super middleweight, things of that nature. I am planning on going to the Michaela Mayer, Sandy Ryan / Bruce Carrington / Xander Zayas card that's going to be at the MSG Theater this weekend. So, um, looking forward to that. Unfortunately, the main card is going to be at like 10:30 p.m. on a Friday night. So, ugh, not great in terms of timing, but
Good on the West Coast. Good on the West Coast.
some interesting fights this weekend with that. Alicia Baumgartner's back in the ring. I think she's fighting Delphine Pursoon. So a lot of interesting fights this weekend. Next weekend, Nick Ball. And our next post-fight live show, we are planning to do one for Artur Beterbiev versus
Yes.
Dmitry Bivol, which is October 12th. Till then, we'll have these lives weekly, but that's the next post-fight live show. That's what we're targeting. Although I'm very excited for Nick Ball versus Ronnie Rios. We won't do a live for that one.
Yeah, there's some definitely some good fights coming up. Once again, if you rocked with us this morning, if you dropped a comment, thank you so much for hanging out with us
We
this
have one
morning.
more at the buzzer here.
Ooh,
Big
okay.
Surge.
Who always brings heat, friend of the show?
Yes, I think Berlanga and Munguia both stop Plant. Wow, okay. Plant gets dropped super fast. He did against Trevor McCombie. Not sure if he has balance issues, but he goes down too quick.
I think
Canelo dropped him
I
multiple
think
times
Caleb
as well.
Plant's like a live dog though in both fights. Like
I
Caleb
don't think
Plant
he's a
could
dog. I
be.
think he's favored against both guys.
Really, I think
I do.
after their performances against Canelo, even though all three guys have lost to Canelo, listen, I don't know. I think Munguia and Berlanga might get favored over a Plant, or it'd be
And
very close. It'd be very close. It'd be like minus like 154 and a plus like 120 or something like that. You know what I mean? It'd be very close.
Caleb won the most rounds against Canelo, but he got stopped. And he's actually the most recent guy to get stopped by Canelo Alvarez. Like Canelo Alvarez still hasn't gotten a
Few
stoppage
years
from that.
removed though, and he also had a pretty nasty knockout after that.
Yeah.
So we've seen different versions of Caleb Plant, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know because he's slicker than both defensively. He's better than both, but he like you could tell me, hey, Caleb Plant has a worse chin than both of them. He definitely has a
But
worse
he
one than Jaime
recovers.
Munguia.
But he recovers. Like the only time was that
Didn't
Canelo
against Canelo
knockout.
Alvarez.
Yeah, he didn't against Canelo, but he does recover.
Like we can say, oh, but that's Canelo Alvarez, and it's like he hasn't really been that since. So what I don't know what version of Canelo Alvarez stopped him. Now it was pre-Dimitri Bivol, so maybe that's where Canelo Alvarez started moving a little bit past his prime or whatever the case may be. Because again, it's hard to drop in weight like that,
Hmm.
and he hasn't finished anybody since. But I don't know. I would watch all those fights. I want to see how Berlanga looks in his next fight. I want to see what's next for Caleb Plant. Like, is Caleb Plant going to fight Christian Mbili? Can y'all actually make
That's a
that fight
great fight.
happen? I
That's
would
a
love.
very
I
good
would love
fight.
for that fight to happen. Because I'm not sure Caleb Plant beats Christian Mbili just because Christian Mbili is on a run right now. Like that's a tough one to also assess. I would want to
But that
think
would
more
be
about
Christian
that
Mbili's. That would be his toughest test yet to
easily.
fight a guy like Caleb Plant. So
Hmm.
that's a fight that should be made because I think Christian Mbili. When I take a look at his resume, I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't know. You know what I mean? Like I need to see him fight someone of that stature like a Caleb Plant. But nonetheless, thanks so much for rocking out with the show. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and we'll be back with some more content. If some news breaks this week, we might hop on and do a live show. But we'll definitely be back the following week in some exciting fights coming up this weekend. Bryan, I'll let you have the last words.
See y'all soon.